The answer is simple: get out of the way. Because the other side of what we have seen over the course of the last 2 years is how impressive the people of this Commonwealth are in their industry, in their ability to adapt to what's out there, and to their ingenuity. And we are seeing that again on full display today. I want to go into another brief diatribe on something that I've been reading, and I just finished reading, and I think it ought to be the mandatory reading for every elected official, is the biography on Calvin Coolidge by Amity Schloss. What a phenomenal book. Well written, the historical relevance of it. We think that we're so unique in today's present age, but we're really not. That era, post-World War I, was struggling with inflation. They were struggling with debt. Now, the national debt was something like $22 or $23 billion, which seems like a nickel to us today. But then, that was almost 100% of the national GDP, which is about the equivalency of where we are with our national debt today. So there are some serious parallels. And what you had was a Harding administration, and after he died, a Coolidge administration come in, and they ran on the platform of normalcy. Normalcy was the campaign. Okay. It doesn't seem to make sense, but if you dig into it, it makes perfect sense. What they were saying is the government has failed. We've tried all these different experiments during the Wilson administration. We've tried all of these different things. Now we're dealing with inflation. Now we're dealing with all of this debt. And we want to go back to letting the markets work. I am telling you, I see this coming, and the first elected official at a national level that really embraces this idea that the government needs to stop experimenting, that the government needs to just back off and let the markets work, so you will see a revitalization similar to what Reagan did in 1980. And a lot of what he depended on was Calvin Coolidge. And the brains behind Calvin Coolidge, this is why I really like Calvin Coolidge, was Andrew Mellon, who was his Treasury Secretary, who was born in Pittsburgh, very close to where I was born, actually. I was born at Shadyside Hospital. He was born in that same area in Oakland. And Andrew Mellon had the philosophy of, we call it trickle-down economics. He called it scientific taxation, which his theory was that if you cut the right brackets of taxes, what would end up occurring at the end of it would be actual growth in revenue, which ended up being completely true. He would cut taxes, and they saw revenue actually growing because people were investing, and the tax rate then was something like 70% at the top rate after World War I. There is a lot for us to learn, but one of the things, and this is where my question comes in for you, Mr. Couchman, one of the things that the Coolidge administration did exceedingly well, and not as well done in the Harding administration, but the Coolidge administration did exceedingly well, was budgeting. It was part of their program was not only to cut taxes, but was also to cut expenditures. And they did this, and they had a demand, their budget secretary, who I cannot remember his name, Lauder or something, but it was a big part of the biography too, and I fluffed on his name. I can't remember what his name is, but I'll figure it out. The budgeting process was he charged every department to cut by 2% every single year, 2%, 2%, 2%, and then when that became impossible, the charge was cut by 1%. And ultimately, they ended up with a much saner fiscal house by the end of the Coolidge administration. How can we implement budgeting protocols that are responsible, that ensure that we are going down a path of fiscal sanity?
Absolutely. That is a wonderful question, and I spend a lot of time thinking about it. We do occasionally have incredible leaders like Calvin Coolidge or President Reagan that will try to hold people's feet to the fire and drive efficiencies. But it's really a legislature's job to review everything, to sort through it, to decide what actually makes sense, and then to have the ability to do something about it when they find something where maybe you can add value by doing this thing or not doing this thing. And so that's why I spoke today about a couple of pieces that would help the legislature do that. The idea of a comprehensive budget. You've got, 2/3 of your spending in the shadow budget that isn't part of the 17 bill appropriations process. You have tax proposal or tax laws rates, bases, tax expenditures that aren't as much part of they aren't as integrated into the annual budget process as they should be. You've got a lot of money or a lot of resources that are being dedicated to various tax expenditures. It doesn't get any sort of weighing against other things. So when you put it all together, you kind of convert the headwinds that you have from a not so good system into tailwinds to kind of make it easier to move in the right direction. That's what the fixing the system is all about. I was just testifying before the Kansas legislature virtually a few days ago, and they're very interested in moving from a governor-dominated budget process to a legislator-dominated budget process. So that's one of the things I talked about, the comprehensive budget, the structural balance over the medium term, so you have nice, stable, predictable policies, and you can be thinking about how do we take our state or commonwealth to the next level rather than just respond to the flood of ideas coming from the governor's office about how to deal with revenue swings. Like, that's not a healthy situation. And then another one is something that I didn't mention today, but Wisconsin and Rhode Island have for generations not had the possibility of government shutdowns. They have what's called automatic continuing appropriations, and that means that the appropriations continue on at the same level even though the economy is growing. So it gives you a nice baseline from which you can operate from. North Carolina just adopted this in 2016 through their comprehensive budget, and it has kept the conflict between what is now a Republican supermajority legislature and a progressive Democratic governor from going totally off the rails. And then the other thing that I talked about was not letting the governor give the State of the State address before the governor submits the budget request to the legislature. Now, I don't know what the timing is in Pennsylvania. I haven't looked at that, but in Kansas, they're backwards. They let the governor give the fancy speech and then, send the budget in the next day. And so, it gives the governor undue influence in setting the conversation with the media and everything around that speech. There are other pieces too, but ultimately, you just need to have a real budget that has everything in it and have legislators empowered to deliberate. In Pennsylvania right now, the Senate has a very narrow Republican majority, the House has a very narrow Democratic majority, and too often there's a situation where the majority party just totally cuts out the minority party from being able to participate. I'm sure you've seen that. It's probably not so fun. And
call ourselves the Mushroom Caucus. I won't say why on film, but yeah.
I know exactly why, because
in the dark and fed manure.
That's right. I was once part of a staff working group. We called ourselves that in D.C. But where are we going here? But does any other organization succeed when it systematically excludes, barely less than half of the majority of their members? I can't think of one, but we somehow expect that legislatures can do that. And look, I'm a Republican, we all are, but sometimes our friends across the aisle have some ideas that are worth considering and maybe worth passing. And so, we need to, have a bottom-up legislature where you can really deliberate the best ways to move the Commonwealth forward.